Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for being here today. My name is Brad Joya, and I serve as an English teacher and headmaster here. I'm really pleased to introduce via a student who's going to make the real introduction, Daryl Davis. I heard about him because Jacob, who's going to come up momentarily, was on a great trip this summer where he met some fascinating people, and he was really excited about telling us and me about his visit with Daryl Davis. So I'm going to ask Jacob Hanai to come up. He's a senior at MBA, to make a formal introduction for Daryl Davis.
Good evening, everybody. So, over the past summer, I was fortunate enough to hear Daryl Davis speak while on my Wilson grant that was ECAR 36, and my life, it changed from the moment that he started speaking. Mr. Davis is a distinguished pianist who graduated from Howard University with a degree in music and has toured the world performing jazz. While this path was initially his calling, he found another way his voice could change the lives of countless people. Since the 1980s, Mr. Davis has dedicated his life to having the conversations that everyone is afraid to have. As a Christian and a musician, he has been able to use what he has in common to communicate with members of one of the most renowned racist groups in American history, the Ku Klux Klan. By showing respect to the very people who would deny his existence, Mr. Davis has been able to engage over 200 KKK members in conversation. In doing so, he has guided them as they renounce their membership to the KKK. So much of the hate in the world today exists because of ignorance, and this ignorance has caused people to fear one another. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "I'm convinced that men hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. They don't know each other because they don't communicate with each other, and they don't communicate with each other because they are separated from each other." Mr. Davis has made it his life's work to create opportunities for people from very different backgrounds to get to know each other. This, in turn, will help end the ignorance-based hate that we all bear witness to every day. While change takes time, it begins with each of us listening to one another's stories and recognizing the value of every human being. Today, we will hear Daryl Davis' story and take another step towards improving race relations in our country. Please join me in welcoming Daryl Davis to MBA.
Thank you, and good evening. Appreciate you all coming out here and supporting my lecture here. I'm going to give you a little bit of background, but first let me say, I know a lot of you think this lecture is on the Klan and all that kind of thing, but the lecture is more on communication. And I simply use the Ku Klux Klan as how people on opposite ends of the spectrum can forge productive communication. And Jacob is right, I have dedicated a good portion of my life to doing that. I'm 61 years of age, I'll be 62 in March. But as a child, my parents were in the U.S. Foreign Service. And so starting in 1961, at the age of 3, I would begin traveling overseas as an American embassy brat. And you go to a country, you're there for 2 years, then you return home here to your country, the United States. You're here for a few months, maybe a year, and then you were sent to another country for 2 years. Back and forth, back and forth. That was my life during my formative years. Today, as a professional musician and also as a speaker, I still travel the world. And when you combine my travels with my childhood and my adulthood, I've been now in a total of 57 countries on 6 continents. So I've been exposed to a multitude of colors, nationalities, ethnicities, religions, traditions, cultures, etc. And all of that has helped shape who I've become and my perspectives. When I was overseas as a child in elementary school, my classes were filled with other kids from Nigeria, Italy, Japan, Russia, Germany, France, Sweden. Anybody who had an embassy in those countries, all of their children went to the same school. That's how I grew up overseas. If you were to open my classroom door and peep your head in, you would say, this looks like a United Nations of little kids, because that's exactly what it was. And while many of us perhaps did not speak the same language, we all got along. We played together, we worked together, we had slumber parties together, you name it, we did it together. No issues. But when I would return home, back here, to my own country, I would either be in an all-black school or a black and white school, depending upon whether I was going to the still segregated school or the newly integrated school. And there was not the amount of diversity that I had overseas. It was either all black kids or black and white kids. You didn't see a lot of other ethnicities back then. So literally, when I was living overseas, I was living about 12 years into the future, because that scenario had yet to come here. And when it did, of course, I was already prepared for it. Many of my peers were not. So one of the times when we finished an assignment and came back home, we went to Boston. And my dad was going to complete his master's degree at Boston University. So he enrolled me in a public school there in Boston. The schools were so bad that we moved out to the suburbs a few weeks later to a town called Belmont, Massachusetts, a suburb of Boston, borders right up to Cambridge. And I was in 4th grade, age 10. The year was 1968. I was one of 2 black kids in the entire school. There was a little black girl in 2nd grade, so I didn't really see a whole lot of her. Mostly I would see her at recess or at lunchtime. So consequently, all of my friends were 4th and 5th graders, and they all were white. Many of my guy friends were members of the Cub Scouts, and they invited me to join. So it sounded like fun, get to go camping, tie some knots. So I joined the Cub Scouts. And we had a march, a parade, along with the Girl Scouts, Brownies, Boy Scouts, and 4-H Club, and other organizations, from Lexington to Concord, Massachusetts, to commemorate the ride of Paul Revere. And my den mother even let me carry the American flag. I was the only black participant in this parade. The streets were blocked off, sidewalks were lined with nothing but white people. And we're marching, and people are cheering us and waving and yelling, the British are coming, and all that kind of thing. And everything was fine until we got to some point down this parade route. Suddenly, I was being hit with bottles and soda pop cans and rocks and debris from the street by a small group of spectators off to my right. There's a group of white people, nothing but white people on the sidewalks, a small group of white people. I remember there being a couple kids and a couple adults. The kids were maybe my age, maybe a year older. And because I had no precedent for this kind of behavior, I looked to see, where these things were coming from. They're coming from over here. My first inclination was, oh, those people over there don't like the Scouts. And I did not realize that I was the only Scout getting hit until my den mother, Cub Master, and troop leader all came running and huddled over me with their bodies and escorted me out of the danger. And I kept saying, why? Why are they doing that? What happened? I didn't do anything. And all they would say is, shh, move along, Daryl, move along, hurry up, it'll be okay. They never answered my question. So I'm making up every excuse in the book as to why this is happening. Maybe they're testing me because I'm the new kid on the block. I'd only been there a couple months. I had every excuse but the right excuse. The right excuse never occurred to me. So when I got home, my mother and father, who were not at the parade, were asking me, how did you fall down and get all scraped up? I told them, I didn't fall down. I told them exactly what happened. They're putting Band-Aids on me, and there used to be this red sticky stuff called mercurochrome that they were putting all over me. And I told them what happened, and for the first time in my life, my mom and dad sat me down and explained to me why this had happened. Now understand, I didn't have, big brothers and sisters to learn things from. I'm an only child. My folks got it right the first time. So I always relied on my mom and dad. If I had a problem or a question, they solved the problem or answered the question or gave me the tools by which I could derive the solution or the answer. My mom and dad never lied to me, never. But on this day, in 1968, when they told me why this was happening to me, I truly believed they were lying. I did not believe them. My 10-year-old brain could not get around the idea that someone who had never laid eyes on me, someone who had never spoken to me, someone who knew absolutely nothing about me, would want to inflict pain upon me for no other reason than this, the color of my skin. It didn't make any sense. And those white people over here on the sidewalk did not look any different to me than my white friends overseas, whether they were my friends from the American Embassy, or my little French friends, or my little Swiss friends, or Australian friends, or what have you, or for that matter, my friends right here in Belmont, Massachusetts, and their parents, who for the most part treated me rather well. So there had to be some other reason that would cause somebody to do something to me when I had done absolutely nothing to them. I'm looking for the rationale. There was none. Okay? So I went ahead and believed that my parents were holding some secret. They were lying, and there had to be a reason why they were lying, but I couldn't figure it out. Well, about a month and a half later, that same year, 1968, on April the 4th, Martin Luther King was assassinated. And I remember it very well. Every major city, including right here in Nashville, Tennessee, nearby Boston, my hometown, Chicago, Illinois, near where I live now, Washington, D.C., Detroit, Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York, Los Angeles, every major city in this country burned to the ground with violence and destruction, all in the name of this word that I had just recently learned called racism. So now I realize this phenomenon, which I thought it was, does exist. But my parents had not lied to me. It does exist, but why? Why do people hate somebody because of the color of their skin? So I formed a question in my mind at that age. And that question was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And for the next 51 years, I have been looking for the answer to that question. So that's my background. I went to Howard University and got my degree in music, and today I am a professional musician. But while music is my profession, studying race relations is my obsession. And I happened to be playing, 1983, country music had made a resurgence in the U.S. There had been a movie out called Urban Cowboy with John Travolta and this mechanical bull and all these line dances and stuff. So all these bars and clubs that were playing top 40 and R&B and pop music and whatever else, they switched over to country. So if you want to work in the music industry and play full time, you had to play country. Now I like country music. It wasn't hard to play. I played a lot of blues. I'm going to tell you something right now, in case you don't know. Country and blues are the same music. They are kissing cousins, just 3 chords, all right? So, and maybe a 4th every now and then. But, so country was very easy for me to play. So I joined a country band, and I was the only black guy in the band, and most of the time, the only black guy wherever we would play. Well, we played a bar up in a town called Frederick, Maryland, and the bar was called the Silver Dollar Lounge. The Silver Dollar Lounge was an all-white bar. And when I say all white, I don't mean that black people could not go in there. What I mean is that black people did not go in there, and that was by their own choice. And it was a good choice, because they were not welcome. So here I was in the Silver Dollar Lounge. Now the band, which had been around for a long time, was a friend of mine's band. They had played there before many times, my first time in there. So I'm on the bandstand, and we did our first set, and we took a break, and I'm following the band over to the band table, sit down, and relax. And I felt somebody from behind put their arm around my shoulder. Now, I don't know anybody in this Silver Dollar Lounge, and I see the whole band up ahead of me. So I turned around to see who's touching me, and it was this white gentleman, maybe 15, 18 years older than me. And he says, I really like your all's music. I said, thank you, I appreciate that. Shook his hand, and he points at the bandstand and says, I've seen this here band before, but I ain't never seen you before. Where'd you come from? And I explained, well, yeah, you probably did see them. They told me they played here before. But I just joined the band a couple months back. This is my first time here. He goes, yeah, well, I really like your piano playing. This is the first time I ever heard a black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis. Well, I was not offended, but I was rather surprised that this guy who was, almost 2 decades older than me did not know the black origin of Jerry Lee Lewis's style of piano playing. And I tried to explain to him that Jerry Lee Lewis learned that style from the same place I did, from black, blues, and boogie-woogie piano players. That's where rockabilly and rock and roll came from. Oh, no, Jerry Lee invented that. I never heard no black man play piano like that, except for you. Something, okay, well, this guy, he never heard Little Richard or Fats Domino. I'm the only black guy he's heard play like this. And I assured the guy I was telling him the truth. I said, look, man, I know Jerry Lee Lewis. Jerry Lee Lewis is a very good friend of mine. He's told me himself where he learned how to play. The guy did not buy that I knew Jerry Lee. He didn't buy that Jerry Lee learned anything from black people. But he was fascinated with me and wanted to buy me a drink. Now, I don't drink, but I went back to his table and I had a cranberry juice. He paid the waitress for my cranberry juice, took his glass, and he clinks my glass and cheers me. And then he says, this is the first time I ever sat down and had a drink with a black man. Now I'm really baffled. How is this? This guy is much older than I am. And at that point in my life, I had sat down with literally thousands of white people or anybody else and had a meal, a beverage, a conversation. How is it that this guy had never sat down with a black guy before? And I know that there are black people in Frederick, Maryland. I know that for a fact because I've seen them. So how is it that he somehow missed them all these years? And innocently, I wasn't trying to be facetious, innocently I asked him, I said, why? And he stared down the tabletop and didn't answer me. I asked him again, why? And he had a friend sitting next to him. His friend said, tell him. I said, I'm thinking, it's a mystery here. What's going on here? I said, tell me. He looked back at me just as plain as day, and he said, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan. Well, I burst out laughing, because now I didn't believe him, right? I know a lot about the Klan. I knew a lot about the Klan then. And I knew they didn't just come up and wrap their arms around some black guy and praise their piano playing and want to hang out with them and buy them a drink. It doesn't work that way. So I think, okay, this guy, I'm trying to rationalize why he said that. So my rationale was, this guy thinks I'm jerking him around about Jerry Lee Lewis, so he's going to jerk me around about the Klan. So I'm going along with the joke. And the guy goes into his pocket, pulls out his wallet, extracts this card and hands it to me. It's his Klan membership card. I look at this thing, ooh, I recognize the Ku Klux Klan insignia, which is a red circle with a white cross and a red blood drop in the center. And this thing is for real. So I stopped laughing and I gave it back to him. Now I'm wondering, why am I sitting at this table? And we talked. We talked about the Klan and some other things, but he gave me his phone number. And he wanted me to call him anytime I was to return to the bar with this band, because he wanted to bring his friends, his Klansmen and Klanswomen, to see this black guy play piano like Jerry Lee. So I said, okay, I'll call you. We were there on a 6-week rotation with other bands, and I'd give him a call on a Wednesday or Thursday and say, hey man, we're playing down at the Silver Dollar, come on out. He'd come both nights, Friday and Saturday. He'd bring Klansmen and Klanswomen, and they would gather around the bandstand and watch me play. And then they'd get out on the dance floor and dance. Now, they didn't come in their robes and hoods, right? They came in, street clothes. And so on the break, I'd usually go over to his table, say hello. Some of them were curious about me, wanted to meet me and talk to me. And I talked to them. Others wanted nothing to do with me, just wanted to watch me. So they see me coming, they'd get up and scurry off to some other part of the room so they wouldn't have to deal with me, which is fine too. Well, this went on till about the end of that year. And then I quit that band and I went back to playing rock and roll and R&B and whatever else was going on. And then it dawned on me, a long time thereafter, Daryl, the answer to your question that's been plaguing you since age 10, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And nobody's been able to answer that for you. The answer fell right into your lap. better to ask that question of than someone who would go so far as to join an organization that has over 100-year history? The Klan was formed in 1865. That has over 100-year history of practicing hating people, people who do not look like them, and people who do not believe as they believe. Why don't you track down that Klansman and ask him? He could answer. So I decided, and I have a vast collection of books that I built up by that time. I had books on black supremacy, white supremacy, the Ku Klux Klan, the Nazis in Germany, the neo-Nazis over here, looking for the answer, but none of my books answered it. And there had been no books written by a black author on the Ku Klux Klan. They'd all been written by white authors. Obviously, a white author would have easier access and less fear of ramifications of things like that. So, they could get an interview, or they could join the Klan undercover, get a story, and get out and write about it. I couldn't do that. But I decided I want to write the first book by a black author on the Klan from the perspective of sitting down face to face and talking with them. There have been 2 books written by black authors that dealt with the Klan, but each author detailed how he escaped a lynching, one in the 1930s and the other one in the 1940s, but not from the perspective of sitting down face to face and interviewing their prospective lynchers. That's what I wanted to do. So I decided I'm going to call that guy from the Silver Dollar from past and get him to hook me up with the state leader for the Klan. A state leader is known as the Grand Dragon. Let me just give you the hierarchy real quick. Okay, today there is no such thing as the Ku Klux Klan. There used to be the Ku Klux Klan and many chapters of that organization. Today there are many Ku Klux Klans. There's no the Ku Klux Klan Central. They've all splintered off of each other, and they're all these autonomous groups. They all have basically the same belief system, the same colors on their robes that designate their rank, the same titles, same secret handshake, same passwords, and same belief system, but they're all autonomous. So you might have the Dixie Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, the Rebel Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, the Invisible Empire Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, on and on and on. These are all separate Klan groups. And if you see any of them together in public, they will hold a united front. But behind closed doors, they are rivals with each other. They don't like each other because each one thinks they're the real Klan, and that's a wannabe Klan. So, a lot of competition going on there. But if you have a Klan group and you establish a chapter of your group in another state or in multiple states, you may then consider yourself to be a national Klan group, and therefore you must have a national leader. Like we call our national leader the president. They call theirs the imperial wizard. The word imperial implies that person is a national officer. Wizard is the highest office, like president. An imperial caliph would be like a vice president. And then you have secretary, treasurer, on and on. And then the next would be a state leader. All the state leaders report to the national leader. So we call our state leader the governor. They call theirs the Grand Dragon. Anybody prefixed with grand means that person is on the state level. A Grand Dragon being the top in the state, the governor. A Grand Caliph would be like a lieutenant governor. Then within the state you have counties. A county leader is known as the Great Titan. Anybody great is on the county level. Within the county you have districts, what they call claverns. And a clavern leader, what we would call a district leader, a mayor, a councilman, an alderman, a selectman, people like that. They call that person the exalted cyclops. And again, they have the secretary and treasurer, etc. And then you just have your plain, white-robed, rank-and-file Klansmen and Klanswomen. So I wanted this guy to put me in touch with the Grand Dragon for the state of Maryland. That's where I live right now. I want to start with him, interview him, and then go up north, interview some other people up there, go down south, interview people down here, go to the Midwest and West. And then I'd have my book, the first book written by a black author on the KKK. So I tracked down that guy's number. I still had it, and I called it. It had been disconnected. So it took me a couple weeks to track him down. It turned out he had moved, and he didn't have a phone, but he had an address. So I had no way of letting him know I was going to come over and visit him. So I just showed up at his apartment one evening. And he hasn't seen me in a good while. He opens the door, he goes, "Daryl, what are you doing here?" And he steps out and looks up and down the hall. And when he, see if I brought anybody with me. Well, when he stepped out of his apartment, I stepped in. So he turned around, he came back in, he goes, "What's going on? Are you still playing? What's going on?" I said, Yeah, I'm still playing, but listen, I need to talk to you about the Klan. He says, "The Klan?" I said, "Yeah, you remember, right?" He goes, "Well, I was." And he went into this long dissertation as to why he quit. And I said, "Well, where's all your Klan stuff?" And he says, "What do you mean my Klan stuff? My robe and hood?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, they came and got it." I said, "What do you mean they came and got it? Don't you own your robe and hood?" And he went on to tell me, which I later found out to be true, that when you join, if you can afford it outright, you pay for it, and you pay for your little book, Constitution book and handbook and different things, and you own them, for as long as you want them. But if you cannot afford it, you can still take the robe and hood and the other stuff home with you, but you put in extra money every dues period until it's paid off. Well, apparently he had not paid off his robe and hood, so they came and repoed his robe and hood. So he said that when they came to get it, he could not find the mask that went over the hood to cover his face, but he has since found it and had to return it. I said, "Let me see it." He went down the hallway to his room or some room that was back there and returned and handed me this mask. So I'm looking at this thing and I said, "Do you know Roger Kelly?" "Yeah, I know Roger. Roger was my Grand Dragon." I said, "Well, listen, I need you to hook me up with Mr. Kelly. I want to interview him for a book I'm going to write." "Oh, Daryl, I can't do that, man." I said, "Why not?" He goes, "Man, I cannot bring a black man to the Grand Dragon. We both would be in trouble." I said, but you're not a member anymore." He goes, "It doesn't matter." So I said, "Look, you got to return this mask, right?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Give me Roger Kelly's phone number and address, and I'll go to his house and I'll return it for you." He snatched that thing right out of my hand and said, "No way." And I had to beg and plead with him to give me Mr. Kelly's address and phone number. He finally gave it to me on the condition that I not reveal to Mr. Kelly where I got his personal information. I said, "Okay." And he warned me. He said, "Daryl, do not go to Roger Kelly's house. Roger Kelly will kill you." And I said, "Well, that's why I need to go. That's exactly why I need to go. I want to find out, what is it that Roger Kelly fears of me or sees in me that he doesn't even know? Why would he want to kill me? This is what I'm interested in." So he implored me not to go. He told me of a bar up in Thurmont, Maryland. Some of y'all ever heard of Thurmont, Maryland? Nobody. Okay, yes you have. Everybody in here has heard of Thurmont, Maryland. I'll tell you why. Because Thurmont, Maryland is the home of Camp David, the presidential retreat. Okay, but it was also the home of the Klan in Maryland. So, not that one is associated with the other, but anyway, so he told me about a bar up there that the Klan hangs out in every Saturday night, and I would find Roger Kelly there. He says, "I don't guarantee that Roger Kelly would even talk to you, but you're safer to approach him in a public place than go on his property." I said, "Okay." So I'm going to skip ahead. So I did go to that bar. Roger Kelly was not there the night that I went, but I didn't go on a Saturday. I went on a Sunday and he wasn't there. Anyway, I gave my secretary Roger Kelly's number. Now my secretary is white. Now it doesn't matter to me. I wouldn't even really mention that, but it plays into my story. I asked, her name is Mary. I asked Mary to call Roger Kelly. I wanted her to call him. I could have called him myself because I'm the one who had the number. But I did not want to call him because I feared that he might detect in my voice that I'm black and say, "I'm not talking to you," click, and then my whole project would have ended before it ever got started. So I had Mary call him because I knew that he would know by her voice that she's white. And I also knew, because of the mentality, that he would not automatically assume that this white woman is working for a black man, especially a black man who's writing a book on the Klan, because they did not exist. So that might increase the chances of him agreeing to do the interview. And I specifically told her, "Do not tell Mr. Kelly that I'm black. If he asks, don't lie to him. But don't allude to it, don't give him reason to ask. And I had a couple reasons for that. Because number one, if he knew that I was black, either he might decline me, or if he accepted, he might have different answers prepared in the interim than he would have for a white interviewer. So I wanted it to be spontaneous, candid. And he didn't need to know what color I was anyway until he saw me. Obviously, when he sees me, he can figure it out. So she understood, she called him, and he agreed to do the interview, and he didn't ask what color I was. So we set it up for the motel above the Silver Dollar Lounge, Truck Stop Motel. And at 5:15 on a Sunday afternoon, Mary and I got there several hours early. I gave her some money and sent her down the hall to get some soda pop out of the machine and put it in the ice bucket, get it cold, and so I would be able to be hospitable and offer my guests a cold beverage. I had no idea what this man was going to do when the door opened to the room and he sees me, and is he going to attack me? Is he going to walk away? Or is he going to come in and do the interview? But in any event, I wanted to be cordial and hospitable and offer him a cold beverage. So she got everything set. Now, the way the room just happened to be in this motel, if you people are in the hallway and the door is here to the room, you cannot see who's in the room standing in the doorway. You have to enter the room, turn to your right, and the room is back here. So you have to come halfway in the room before you know who's in the room. So I took the lamp off and put the table in the most obscure corner of the room and put a chair on one side for Mr. Kelly, a chair on this side for me. And I had a bag similar to this bag right here. And in it I had a copy of the Bible, and I had a cassette recorder and some blank cassettes. I put the cassette recorder in the center of the table, all hoping that the man would come in. And if he did come in, hoping that he would sit down and allow me to record this interview. So why did I have the Bible? Because the Ku Klux Klan claims to be a Christian organization, and they claim that the Bible preaches racial separation. Now, in my reading of the Bible, I've never seen that in there. So I want to be able to pull out my Bible, my King James, and say, here, Mr. Kelly, please, show me chapter and verse where it says blacks and whites must be separate. So I'm all prepared, right? 5:15, right on time. I'm seated at the table where you can't see me until you come in the room. Mary hops up, runs around the corner, and opens the door. In walks the Grand Nighthawk. Nighthawk in Klan terminology means bodyguard, security. So a Grand Nighthawk would be the bodyguard for the Grand Dragon, like an Imperial Nighthawk would be the bodyguard for the Imperial Wizard. In walks this Grand Nighthawk. He's wearing military camouflage with the Ku Klux Klan patch right here, that red circle, white cross, blood drop. Over here are the initials KKK, and embroidered on his beret says Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And right here on his hip, he has a semi-automatic handgun. He comes in and turns the corner, and Mr. Kelly is walking directly behind him in a dark blue suit and tie. The Nighthawk turned the corner and saw me and just froze. Well, Mr. Kelly did not realize that his Nighthawk had stopped short and slammed into his back and knocked him forward. So now they both are stumbling around trying to regain their balance, and they're like looking all over the room, and I'm just sitting there, looking at them. And I could see in their faces the apprehension. I could read their faces. I knew what was happening. They're thinking, did the desk clerk give us the wrong room number? Or is this an ambush or what? So I saw the apprehension. I stood up and I went like this to show I had nothing in my hands. And I walked forward. I said, hi, Mr. Kelly, I'm Daryl Davis. He shook my hand. And the Nighthawk shook my hand. So far, so good. I said, come on in, please, have a seat. Mr. Kelly sat down. And the Nighthawk stood at attention to his right. And before I could sit down, Mr. Kelly said to me, Mr. Davis, do you have any form of identification? I said, sure. Give him my driver's license. He said, oh, you live on such and such street in Silver Spring. Well, now that had me a little concerned. Why is he looking at my street address? Is he going to come burn a cross in my yard? All he needs to do is look at my picture, look at my name, match it up to my face right here, and give me back my license. Here he is reading my street. So I did not want to let him know that he had unnerved me a little bit, but I wanted to let him know in no uncertain terms was he to come to my house with any, nefarious ideas. And so I said, yes, Mr. Kelly, that is where I live. And you live at, and I named his house number and his street. That way I was leveling the playing field. You know where I live, I know where you live. If you come visit me, I'm going to come visit you. So we're going to confine all this visiting to this motel room. So he smiled, he nodded like he understood. I did not realize it that day, excuse me, but I had been very presumptuous. I had no reason to fear that Mr. Kelly would come to my house and do something stupid. What it was, I didn't find out until months later. One of Roger Kelly's Klan members lived right down the road from my house. I had no idea. And Mr. Kelly would have to drive down my street to get to that guy's neighborhood. So it was just pure coincidence that he recognized my street name. That was it. But I had no way of knowing that particular day. I found out many months later. That Klan member who lived down the road from me, today he sits in a federal prison in the state of Maine. He'll be there for a long time for committing a hate crime. So anyway, we got on with this interview. And within 10 minutes, I asked Mr. Kelly, why would he hate somebody he doesn't even know, especially a black person? I'm told that, that black people are criminals. We are prone to crime, which is why there are more black people in prison than white people. This is true. There are more blacks in prison than white people, but that's not the reason why. Not because we're prone to crime. I'm told that we're lazy. We want to scam the government welfare system because we don't want to work. I'm told that black people have a smaller brain than white people, therefore our IQ is not as high. So I listened to him. Most people would cut him off right there and the fight would be on because what he is saying is offensive. Yes, it was offensive. However, I personally was not offended by it. I'll tell you why. Not because it was true. I was not offended by it because it was untrue. This man cannot define who I am. He only met me 10 minutes ago. All he sees is this. And he's going to tell me I'm a criminal and I'm on welfare and my brain is small. I don't have a criminal record. I have never been on welfare. I've never measured my brain, but I'm sure it's the same size as anybody else's. So why should I be offended by somebody spewing a lie? If I got into it with him, all I would be doing would be giving him credibility and empowering what he already believes by cutting him off. So I listened to him, and then I let him know my record. So, we continued on with this thing, and every time he would say something like, Mr. Davis, the Bible says, I'd reach down into my bag, pull out my Bible, hand it to him. Please, Mr. Kelly, please show me where, chapter and verse. Or if my cassette ran out of tape, I'd reach down, get a fresh tape. Well, every time I reached like this, the Nighthawk reached like this. I understood that. He's doing his job. That's his job because he does not know what's in my bag. And his job is to protect his boss. So I understood that. After about an hour or so, he relaxed. Every time I went inside the bag, he didn't move. He realized there was no threat in the bag. But a little over an hour into this interview, all of a sudden, there was a very short noise, like this. That was it. And we all jumped. It came out of nowhere. And it was so short that my ear could not discern what it was. But I knew that Mr. Kelly had made that noise. And now how did I know that? Well, process of elimination. If I didn't do it, he had to have done it. So, because I could not discern the noise, I perceived it to be an ominous, threatening noise. So I became fearful for my life. And I went into survival mode. And I popped up out of my chair that quick, because my mind is racing, thinking, what did I just do? What did I just say to cause him to go off and make some weird noise? I came up and I hit the table. And when you go into survival mode, when you fear for your life, you will do basically one of four things. Some people, they just They pass out, they faint. The fear is so great their brain cannot process it, and it shuts down, and they fall out and faint. I don't do that. Some people, they will constrict. Their muscles will tighten up, and they'll constrict and start shaking, and they can't move. You can be punching them, kicking them, and they won't even be deflecting the blows because they're paralyzed from this fear. That's called paralysis by fear. You've seen somebody in a fight, and they curl up into a fetal position. They can't move. I don't do that either. The third thing people would do is to run away. And that is your best option. As quickly as you can, separate yourself from the source of that fear. Get away from it. That's your best option. But that was not, and that's what I would have done. That was not an option for me, because you cannot outrun a bullet in a motel room. The only person that I know for sure who was armed was the Nighthawk. I could see his gun on his hip. I did not know if Mr. Kelly had a weapon up under his suit jacket or not. I knew that I did not have a weapon. I knew that my secretary, who's up here sitting on top of the dresser, because there were no other chairs, did not have a weapon. So I did not want to die that day. And I knew Mr. Kelly, I'm hearing that other former Klansman's voice, Daryl, Roger Kelly will kill you, don't fool with him. So I went into action. The fourth thing people will do, which was what I was about to do, is to do a preemptive strike. Get them before they get you. I was ready to dive across that table, grab the Nighthawk, grab Mr. Kelly, and slam them down to the ground, and take away the Nighthawk's gun, and hold them at gunpoint, okay, in order to protect myself and my secretary. It's my job to protect me and my secretary, just like it's the Nighthawk's job to protect himself and his boss. So when I hit the table, Mr. Kelly is right here. I'm looking right into his face, right into his eyes. I didn't say a word, but I knew that he could read my eyes. My eyes were speaking loud and clear. In fact, my eyes were shouting so loud he could hear my eyes. My eyes were saying to him, "What did you just do?" Well, Mr. Kelly's eyes had fixated on mine. He didn't say a word either, but I could read his eyes. His eyes were saying to me, "What did you just do?" And the Nighthawk's like this, looking at both of us like, "What did either one of y'all just do?" Well, Mary, she realized what had happened. She's up here sitting on top of the dresser. She began explaining it to us when it happened again. The ice in the ice bucket next to her had begun melting, and the cans of soda shifted down the ice. That was it. And we all began laughing at how ignorant we were. Yeah, we're enemies. He's the head of the Klan, I'm a black guy. But we're in the same motel room, sitting at the same table, having a conversation, agreeing on some things, disagreeing on others. But this was a teaching moment. It wasn't a learning moment yet. It was a teaching moment. And the lesson taught is this: all because some foreign, underscore, circle, highlight the word foreign, entity of which we were ignorant, that being the bucket of ice, cans of soda, entered into our little comfort zone via the noise that it made, we became fearful and accusatory of each other because we didn't know what it was. The lesson taught is this: ignorance breeds fear. We fear those things we don't understand. If you don't keep that fear in check, that fear in turn will escalate and breed hatred, because we hate those things that frighten us. If you do not keep that hatred in check, that hatred will escalate and breed destruction. We want to destroy the things that we hate. Why? Because they frighten us. But guess what? They may have been harmless and we were just ignorant. So we saw the whole chain almost unravel to completion. It stopped short of that last component, destruction. Fortunately, had the bodyguard shot me or my secretary, or had I pounced across the table and hurt one of them. However, everybody here, you all did see that chain complete, unravel to completion. 2 years ago in Charlottesville, Virginia, on August 12th, when they had the Unite the Right rally, where all these white supremacists came. And it resulted in a white supremacist getting inside his vehicle and trying to murder as many protesters as he could by driving full force through the crowd of protesters. He succeeded in injuring 20 people and murdering one young lady named Heather Heyer. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Charlottesville momentarily. But ignorance breeds fear, fear breeds hatred, hatred breeds destruction. So if you want to solve this problem that we have, this disease in our country called racism, truly, it's not that hard to solve. It's not as hard as you think it is, okay? But we spend too much time addressing the symptoms. We need to stop worrying about the fear. Stop worrying about the hate. Those are all symptoms. You have to go to the source. Address the source. The source is ignorance. If you cure the ignorance, and there is a cure for ignorance, if you cure the ignorance, there'll be no fear. You only fear what you don't know. When you've cured the ignorance, then you know something. If there's no ignorance, there's no fear. If there's nothing to fear, there's nothing to hate. If there's nothing to hate, there's nothing to destroy. So go to the source. You know, you don't put a Band-Aid on cancer, you go down to the source. Now, some people think ignorance and stupidity are synonymous. For me, they're not. I define it as this. An ignorant person is someone who makes the wrong decision or a bad choice because he or she does not have the facts or the proper information to make the right choice or the correct decision. If you give that person the information, the facts, then you have alleviated their ignorance and they can make the right choice. A stupid person is someone who has the facts, who has the right information, and they still make the wrong choice. For example, let's say I have a room and I paint the walls in the room and I do not post up any signs that say wet paint, stay off the walls. Anybody coming into that room is ignorant, unaware that the walls are wet. And they might go and lean up against the wall, and now they got paint on their clothes. So I can alleviate that ignorance by putting up signs that say wet paint, stay off the walls. I can stand in the doorway and tell each person coming into that room, hey folks, gather around the center. I just painted these walls 10 minutes ago, they're still wet. Now everybody has the proper information and the facts to make the correct decision and good choice. But yet somebody still comes and leans against the wall. And now he wants to know, why is there paint on his clothes? It's because he's stupid. All right? He had the right information, he chose not to use it. Fortunately, there is a cure for ignorance. That cure is called education. Unfortunately, there is no cure for stupidity. If you give somebody the education and they choose not to use it, there's nothing you can do until they decide to employ that education. So, like I said, I'm going to talk about Charlottesville in a minute. So I began, like I said, after this little incident with the soda pop, we carried on. There were no more incidents. The bodyguard relaxed, I relaxed, we laughed, so on. And so I would continue talking with Mr. Kelly. I thanked him for his time. I would call him, invite him to my gigs up in his county when I played up there. He'd come, he'd bring his bodyguard. I'd invite him down to my house. He'd come down to my house. He lived an hour and a half from me. He'd come down to my house, he'd bring his bodyguard. The Nighthawk would sit on my couch next to him. Sometimes the Nighthawk would get bored, take out his gun, and twirl it on his finger like this, while Mr. Kelly and I talked across my coffee table. And we would have lunch or dinner at my dining room table, or we would go out and get lunch or dinner. Now understand something, I'm inferior, but yet this man is in my inferior house, sitting on my inferior sofa, and sitting at my inferior dining room table, eating my inferior food. So you try to find the rationale there. But conversation is what does it. We spend way too much time talking about the other person, talking at the other person, or talking past the other person. I prefer to spend time talking with the other person. And that's what enables this kind of dialogue, this civil discourse to take place. So for 2 years this went on. And I would invite over, after I felt safe that he would not do anything to, I would never want to endanger anybody else. I wasn't so much worried about myself as I was, other people. When I felt, comfortable that he would not do anything to anybody else, I would invite over some of my other black friends, some of my Jewish friends, some of my other white friends, just to engage in conversation with Mr. Kelly. Because I did not want him to think, oh, well, Daryl's an exception. No, I'm not an exception. You need to talk to some other people as well. So he would come down to my house. This would go on for a couple years. And he never invited me to his house. But he was coming down to my house by himself by the end of a couple years. He trusted me that much that he did not bring the Nighthawk. And after a couple years, he got promoted from Grand Dragon to Imperial Wizard. And then he began inviting me to his house. I'd go to his house. I would see his Klan den, where he'd have his meetings. Now, understand something. I'm just telling you about Roger Kelly. There were others that I was interviewing as well, at the same time. Some would talk to me, some would not talk to me. But anyway, I'd take pictures of his Klan den, take notes, and then he began inviting me to Klan rallies. And I would go to these Klan rallies and watch them light up this cross on fire and give all these speeches and things like that. Well, CNN knew who I was through music. I had the great pleasure of playing piano for the man who invented rock and roll, Chuck Berry, for about 32 years. And so they knew who I was through music. They knew who Roger Kelly was through the Klan. And they'd heard about this black musician and this Klan leader who were getting together. So they couldn't believe it. They wanted to do a story. So they called me, and I said, yeah, I'll be fine. They said, when's the next time you're going to a rally? I said, I'll let you know. So when the opportunity arose, I called CNN and said, okay, I'm going to a rally on Saturday, whatever the date was that particular year. And they said, okay, are you performing anywhere on Friday night? I said, yeah. So they came to my band gig to film, to show what I normally do, which is play music. And then Saturday morning, they came to my house, and they followed me 2 hours up the road to this rally. And they said, do you think Roger Kelly will even talk to us? I said, I'll do better than that. When the rally is over, I will get Roger Kelly, the Imperial Wizard, to come down to my house, and you can interview the head of the Klan inside a black man's house. They said, oh, that's different, okay. So they filmed the whole rally. I'll tell you about that in a second. So what do I do when I go to these rallies? I talk to people, those who will talk to me. I don't force anybody to talk to me. But this is one from about 25, 27 years ago, and you can tell I'm a lot lighter and have more hair on my head. There. That's shortly after the rally is over. You see the crosses going out in the background. This is from almost 4 years ago, maybe 3.5 years ago. This one right here is in Maryland. This next one here from 3 or 4 years ago is in Missouri. And while I'm there, like I said, I try to engage in conversation. And it's a conversation, not a debate. Yes, I mean, we will debate things, that we don't agree on, but you frame it as a conversation. Because, you tell somebody, I want to debate you on this, the guard goes up and the offense is on. So, but, when you say, hey, let's have a conversation about it. Let's just exchange some ideas and talk about it. Then the temperature is lowered and you can, make a lot more headway. Okay, so here is the rally that I was telling you about that Roger Kelly invited me to and CNN went. This clip that I'm going to show you right now was shown on CNN and on HLN, Headline News, every hour for 24 hours all over the world. I'm going to show it to you right now, and I want you to pay particular attention to what Roger Kelly says. He says that even though he and I would do different things together, it did not change his views on the Klan, because his views on the Klan had been cemented in his mind for years. And he goes on to say how he believes in separation of the races, because he finds that to be in the best interest of all races. But then, listen to what he says towards the end of the clip about respect. It's very interesting, and what the two CNN anchor desk people say in their little commentary.
This is CNN.
Welcome to this final hour of CNN Sunday Morning. I'm Bob Kane, and today for Miles O'Brien.
Good morning to you all. I'm Joey Chen.
Friendship. can transcend all kinds of boundaries.
Just look at us. And two men in Washington area are showing that even an African-American man and a member of the Ku Klux Klan can find common ground. CNN's Carl Rochelle reports.
Daryl Davis plays a hot piano. It's part of the show, and it makes him stand out. He also stands out here. Davis is one of the few African Americans you will ever find attending a KKK rally. More than attending, he is welcome.
I got more respect for that black man than I do you white niggers out there.
It's been a tough day for the Klan. Their Maryland rally found many local residents rejecting the message of white separatism. After it's over, Daryl Davis hangs around backstage with his friend, Klan wizard Roger Kelly. It's not unusual for blacks and whites to be friends, but it is unusual to find a black man and a Klan leader chatting pleasantly over an orange soda after a Klan rally. The relationship started over a book Davis was writing. His secretary set up an interview with Roger Kelly, but didn't tell him Davis was black. They talked and talked some more. Davis learning about the Klan, Kelly learning about Davis.
We get to know one another and we do different things, you know. It hasn't changed my views about the Klan, you know, because my views on the Klan's been pretty much cemented in my mind for years.
Kelly and his Klan friends go to hear Davis and his band. And Davis goes to their rallies.
I sat on the front row and listened to each Klansman speak. Some things I agreed with, other things I did not agree with.
Davis thinks that his presence promotes badly needed understanding.
Hate stems, I believe, from fear of the unknown, and I think this is all across the board, regardless of whether it's a Klansman or anything else.
But he has no illusions about the Klan. If he did, his friend would be quick to disabuse them.
And I believe in separation of the races. I believe that's in the best interest of all races.
Does he really? Or has friendship transcended the color barrier? Listen to Kelly at a Klan rally.
I will follow that man to hell and back because I believe in what he stands for and he believes in what I stand for. A lot of times we don't agree with everything, but at least he respects me to sit down and listen to me. And I'll respect him to sit down and listen to him.
The strange relationship of a KKK wizard and his black buddy. In Washington, I'm Carl Rochelle, CNN Sunday Morning.
Strange. Good adjective. Strange.
Certainly that.
Okay, that's the clip. Now, you heard Mr. Kelly say that even though he and I would do different things together, it did not change his views on the Klan, because his views on the Klan had been what? Cemented in his mind for years. And he goes on to say how he believes in separation of the races, because he finds that to be, in the best interest of all races. But he said something very interesting towards the end of that clip. You all hear him say that he respected me? Huh? What's that all about? I mean, that was 2 years after I met him. When I first met him, you know, I'm a criminal, I'm on welfare, my brain's small. You know, I'm inferior. And now, 2 years later, he's the imperial wizard and he respects me. What he said was, we may not agree on everything, but at least he respects me to sit down and listen to me, and I respect him to sit down and listen to him. Those are his exact words. That's very important. Take that home with you. If you don't take anything else home, take that home and apply it in your daily life when you have somebody with an opposing point of view. It doesn't have to be about racism. In fact, let's take racism off the table. There are plenty of hot topics out here. Abortion, nuclear weapons, global warming, the current presidency, the wall on the southern border. I mean, whatever the hot topic is. Right now it's the pending war in Iran or something. All right? You're on one side, somebody else is on the other side. Give your adversary a platform. Allow them to air their views and listen to them. If you agree with them, no problem. If you don't agree with them, it's still no problem. You challenge them, but you don't challenge them violently or rudely. You say, look, I need more clarification as to why you think I should believe that way. Give me a little more explanation. And when you do that, there is an excellent chance that when they finish giving you their spiel, they will give you a platform to present your point of view and your platform. You make sure you have done your homework so that you can present your platform in an intelligent and influential manner. because at the end of the day, you each must think about what the other person said. And if somebody says something to you that goes against whatever you have believed from day one to however old you may be, but a little spark happens, and you think, you know, she does have a point there. You might begin leaning in that direction. So now understand something. I did not respect what Roger Kelly had to say. I'm not a racist, I'm not a supremacist, I'm not a separatist, a nationalist, or any other kind of ist, all right? I did not respect what he had to say, but I respected his right to say it. You understand the difference, right? And that's what enabled the conversation to flow. He listened to me. He may not have agreed with everything I said, but he listened to me. I didn't agree with anything he said, but I listened to him. And we each have to think about what the other person said. Well, apparently, something I said had a bigger impact on him than what he said had an impact on me. Because over time, you know, we would keep on having these conversations. Even after my book came out, I still call Roger, say, hey man, you know, let's go out and have dinner. And we'd go out and have dinner. Sometimes we talk about the Klan. Sometimes the Klan wasn't even mentioned. We talk about the latest James Bond movie. You know, what he saw in it, what I saw in it, who's a better James Bond, Roger Moore, Sean Connery, or whatever. You know, and over time, that cement that he talked about, that held his ideas together, began getting cracks in it. Because some of the things that I was telling him were true. And he had not believed that before, but now he was seeing it. That cement cracked so much that some years ago, Roger Kelly quit the Ku Klux Klan because he no longer believes in what he said in that video. And when Roger Kelly quit the Ku Klux Klan, he gave me his robe and hood. This is the same robe that you saw him wearing in the video clip. This is the robe of the Imperial Wizard. And this, of course, is what's called the hood. They also call it a helmet. Either name is fine. This is the hood. This is the mask. Members who want anonymity, they don't want you to know who they are. They wear this mask to cover their face, and they look at you through these eyelets. So they see you, you don't see them. But if they don't care that their identity is known, then the mask is attached by 3 snaps or Velcro. Just detach the mask, and the face is exposed under the hood. And I have plenty of these robes and hoods that were given to me by active members and leaders after coming to know them over time who have renounced that ideology. Again, I can't stress, it comes from civil discourse. You're going to hear things that you don't like. You're going to hear things that are offensive. But don't take offense to it. Because how can they define who you are? You know who you are. So don't personalize it. You know, because if what they're saying is untrue, then you don't have anything to worry about. If they're calling you something and they're right, well then yeah, you do have something to worry about. But you know who you are. If it's not true, then don't worry about it. You know who you are. And why give credibility to a lie? So just let them get it all out, and then you have your chance to get your platform. Now, you heard the 2 CNN anchor people imply that I was strange. That's okay. Because you know what? If being strange causes people to give up stuff like this, we all need to be strange. All right? Now, I mentioned Charlottesville. Did you all see all that mayhem that went on down in Charlottesville on TV a couple years ago? Huh? Okay. Charlottesville is 2 hours from my house. I'm down there all the time. I know all of those people down there. I know the guy who put together that Unite the Right rally. I know the head of the alt-right, Richard Spencer. Jason Kessler is the one who put together the rally. Jeff Shute, the head of the NSM, National Socialist Movement. All those people. I know them all personally. And I can tell you all kinds of stuff about them, but I'm going to focus on one thing right now. I told you about the car incident. Let's here's one of the scenes that happened in Charlottesville that same day of the rally. Okay, what's going on here? Got this black guy with the improvised flamethrower. It's an aerosol can. He lit a match and created a flamethrower. The guy's coming down the stairs they're trying to hit him with their Confederate flagpoles. All those guys coming down the stairs are all KKK members. You don't know that because you don't see them in their robes and hoods. I know that because I know every single one of them personally. All right? So they're coming down from the park with the Confederate statue. And they're trying to hit this guy, and he's trying to set them on fire. Now, the guy in the white t-shirt and the camouflage pants, that's the Grand Dragon of Virginia. The Imperial Wizard, you don't see him because he has already come down the stairs before this guy lit the flame. He's ahead of them. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. The Imperial Wizard comes down ahead of his Klan group, and meanwhile this guy is lighting the aerosol can. The Imperial Wizard is wearing a bandana on his head, a blue jean vest, and a black jeans. And so he comes around and he walks over this way out of the camera shot, and he happens to turn around. When he turns around, he sees this guy trying to set his members on fire. He pulls out a gun and points it at the black guy's head and shouts, "Hey nigger!" He lowers the gun, boom, and he fires it. And the bullet goes into the gravel right there in front of the black guy's feet. All right? Now, there are police officers standing right here. Right here. You'll see them in green neon vests. They're watching the whole thing go down, and they did not move, did not do a thing, nothing. And that's one reason why the chief, the police chief of Charlottesville got fired. And today they have a new police chief, which they needed. Okay, so let's watch this video. You'll see the guy again in the bandana, blue jean vest, and the black jeans. There he is. You see the police in the background right there in the green vest.
That was a gunshot.
Okay. Let's
gunshot.
okay. Now, whew. You saw him there in his street clothes. This is what he wears at his rallies. That's his Imperial Wizard robe there. Okay, same guy. Now, what would you do if you saw that happen? Let me tell you something. That's Charlottesville, Virginia. That may not be Nashville, Tennessee. It may not be Chicago or Los Angeles or Washington, D.C. or Baltimore or New York or Lexington, Kentucky. It's Charlottesville. But don't think for 1 second, folks, do not think for 1 second it cannot happen right here in Nashville. Anywhere there's hate, it can happen. It can happen. And Charlottesville, which is a nice little community, now they're known all over the world for what? For stuff like that. That shooting, the guy driving his car into the crowd, and it's gotten the reputation of being a white supremacist city. It's not. But because of these incidents, it's the image that is projected on Charlottesville. Charlottesville is known the world over now. Not for anything good. Do not think it cannot happen in Nashville. But furthermore, let me tell you something. Charlottesville is just as much a part of your city as Nashville is. Charlottesville is an American city. If you are an American, every city in this country is your city. You just happen to live in Nashville. But Charlottesville belongs to you. So does Chicago. So does where I live in Silver Spring, Maryland. Okay? Every American city is your city, because this is your country. You can't live in multiple places at the same time. You can have multiple homes, sure, but you can't be in each one at the same time. But that does not negate your responsibility to your cities and your society in this country. So what would you do when you see this kind of thing happen? Well, we can blame people, okay? We can blame, let's blame the black guy for trying to set people on fire. That's wrong. He should be blamed, okay? But his camp is going to say, let's blame the Klansmen coming down the stairs trying to hit somebody with the flagpole. Sure, we can blame them. They shouldn't have been doing that. Let's blame the Imperial Wizard for shooting the gun. He fired a gun into a crowd. He could have hit somebody. He should be blamed. Shouldn't be doing that. Let's blame the police for not doing their job, just standing around watching the thing go down. We can blame them too. Or perhaps, maybe we should blame ourselves for allowing our country, our society, to reach that point in the 21st century. Maybe we should answer that ourselves. And I'm going to tell you something. You don't have to answer the question tonight to me. But when you go home, think about an answer to this question that I'm going to ask you right now. And come up with an answer. And whether you give it to somebody or you just answer to yourself. I'm going to tell you something. Our society, our country, can only become one of two things. It can become that which we sit back and let it become, or it can become that which we stand up and make it become. So you have to ask yourself the question, am I going to sit back and see what my country becomes, or am I going to stand up and make my country become what I want to see? That's the question you have to answer. And it applies to Charlottesville, Nashville, anywhere, because this is your country. So whatever problems Charlottesville has, they're your problems too. That's the question that you need to think about and you answer before you go to bed tonight. Whether you answer it to your partner or you just answer it to yourself. All right? Are you going to sit back and see what your country becomes, or are you going to stand up and make your country become what you want to see? So, how did I answer that question? I chose the latter. What did I do? I called that guy up on the phone. I said, hey man, I said, you and I need to talk. Not Klansman to black man, but man to man. Your Confederate history is as much a part of my history as my black history is a part of your history. It's all American history. We need to explore American history together. I talked to him for about 30 minutes on the phone. I convinced him we need to get together and talk about American history. And I said, I will listen to you give me a lesson in Confederate history, but I want you to hear me out too. He said, all right. So we set a date. He gave me directions to his house. I drove an hour and a half to this guy's house by myself, got to his house, sat in his living room, had all kinds of Confederate stuff all over the walls, all kinds of KKK stuff, portraits of Nathan Bedford Forrest and all kinds of nonsense on there. I sat on his couch on this Confederate flag blanket, and I listened to him give me a lecture on American history from a Confederate perspective. For 2 hours, I listened. And some things he got right, some things he got wrong. And when he finished, I corrected him on the things that he got wrong. And when it was my turn, I said, here's what I want to do. Now, he's there with his Klan's lady, fiance. She's just sitting there chiming in every now and then. And I said, here's what I want to do. Let's set a date. I want you and the Klan's lady, your fiance, to come down to my house. I said, I have connections down at the new Smithsonian National Museum of African American Heritage, History and Culture. Let's go down there and let's tour that museum together. He thought about it. They said, okay. So we set a date. I got my connection. I secured some tickets, and they came down to my house. I live 15 minutes from DC in Maryland. They got in my car. I drove them down to this museum. And here we are entering the, this is last year, well, it's 2020 now, 2018, okay? Here we are entering the museum. Notice the head attire, walking into this, the biggest black museum in the world. Okay, and there's the Klan's lady with him. So what did we do? We toured the museum, looked at displays on slavery, on integration, segregation. We watched little video clips on blacks in the arts, blacks in science, blacks in medicine, music, sports, education, etc. And now, you see him holding her right there, yeah? You see that? Huh? Okay. Now, he is a big rock and roll fan. His idol is Elvis Presley. I love Elvis Presley. I saw Elvis 14 times. I met him. I went to Elvis's funeral. I love Elvis. But Elvis Presley did not invent rock and roll. My boss invented rock and roll, Chuck Berry. If it wasn't for Chuck Berry, you wouldn't have Elvis Presley, or the Beatles, Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, Elton John, Ted Nugent, Metallica, Jimi Hendrix. Anybody who plays rock, any kind of rock, all their DNA goes back to Chuck Berry. Just like no matter what kind of car you drive, whether you drive some beat-up Chevrolet or some Rolls Royce or Mercedes or Lamborghini, it all goes back to Henry Ford and his Model A, all right, or Model T. So one of Chuck Berry's Cadillacs is in that museum. I saw it at Chuck's house, but he donated it to the museum. So I took these two to see he liked Chuck's music. I took him to see the car. Well, here is a picture of me playing with Chuck Berry. He's getting ready to go and do his duck walk there. So now we go see Chuck's car in the museum. Now who's holding his fiance? I work fast. Okay. Now, it's impossible to see the entire museum. We were there for like 2.5 hours or so. I mean, it'll take you 2.5 months and you still won't see the whole museum. It's just expansive. But anyway, after 2.5 hours of touring it, we went outside, and I gave her the translator. I gave her my cell phone camera, and I said, "Listen, take a picture of this guy and I." And so I posed by the marquee for the museum, and here's what he did. That's a long ways from "Hey nigger," boom. A little bit less than a year. That incident was August 12th of 2017. This picture was in June of 2018. Now, the story does not end there. It goes deeper. We've been working together that year, learning from each other, becoming friends, all right? And he's going to marry that girl, that Klan's lady. You know where she's from? She's from Chattanooga, Tennessee, all right? So, of course, I get invited to the wedding. I'm the only black person at this Klan wedding and the only non-Klan person there, all right? But it goes deeper than that. Her father, down here in Chattanooga, was too incapacitated to make the trip up there to walk his daughter down the aisle. Rather than ask one of their trusted Klan members to be the surrogate father and do that duty, they asked me. Surreal. But that's how much they thought of me. Would I walk her down the aisle? thought about it. I said, yeah. There you go. And that's at his house. He got married in his backyard. And if you look up in his room, you see his Confederate flag in his window. All right? Now, CNN, during the course of the year, they found out I was working with them and things like that. They interviewed him, and he said he was going to be buried in his Klan robe. That was early on. But now he's letting this guy walk his bride down the aisle. So things are changing.
As you stand in the presence of God.
This time, it was Davis giving something away. The bride.
I mean, his friendship has been something really special to me. She wanted me to be a part of this wedding. That's beautiful. That's a seed planted.
Okay, there you have the imperial wizard groom, the Klan's lady bride, and the surrogate father. These things are possible. These things can happen. But I'm telling you, if I said it once, I said it 1,000 times. It comes with civil dialogue. We have to do something about the society, folks. I mean, when we were kids, we didn't have to go through metal detectors in our junior high school. I don't know about Nashville, but in D.C., they got metal detectors at the front door of all these junior high schools and high schools. We didn't have to go to church armed because we were afraid some gunman might come into our church and we had to take him out. We didn't have to worry about having a Hanukkah party in our house and some stranger come in there and start stabbing people. Or our kids going to elementary school and some shooter come in and waste the whole classroom. We have to address these problems. We cannot just sit back and ignore them and keep watching them on TV and say, oh, that's a real tragedy, that's a real shame. We have to stand up and make this country become what we want it to be. So that's what I do. Now, about half a year ago, let me just get out of this thing right here. And where my cursor is, there it is. About a half a year ago, this military officer in Silver Spring, where I live, was arrested. He had a stockpile of weapons, was going to start the race war, and all kinds of stuff. He was a Navy officer. And fortunately, somebody had infiltrated, or whatever, and foiled his plot. And these kinds of things seem to be happening more and more. Every time you turn on the TV, somebody's, done something. I want to show you real quick how this works. Before I do that, here is, they call him the killer. I've known this guy since I was a teenager. That's Jerry Lee Lewis. And that's a young me, a real young me, a skinny me. And then this is a little more recent, myself with Billy Joel and Jerry Lee. Okay, this guy here, he was a Grand Dragon in Maryland. His day job was Baltimore City police officer. He was not an undercover cop in the Klan. He was a bona fide Klansman on the Baltimore City police force. Okay, this next guy here, he was a chief petty officer in the U.S. Navy. He went on to become a high-ranking neo-Nazi officer in a neo-Nazi movement in our country. And at the same time, he became the Grand Dragon for the Klan in Florida, state leader for Florida for the Klan. He hated black people, he hated Jewish people. In fact, he made a remark. He said, all Jews are homosexuals and they should all be exterminated, every last one of them. He was vehemently racist, vehemently anti-Semitic. And I will promise you, this guy was well on his way to becoming somebody you'd hear on the news, a lone wolf, who walked into a church or a synagogue and took people out. So here he is right here. And it's playing. And this is what he becomes. And listen to what he says. Got tattoos on his chest.
Jews and homosexuals, they should be exterminated, every single one of them.
Who's got the swastika and the Klan insignia, each tattooed on his chest. There he is in his Grand Dragon robe. And he on some flyers. You hear about people waking up in the morning and finding Klan flyers on their front porch or in their yard. That's what he does after midnight, run around, throw Klan recruitment flyers or threats in people's yards. Now, I knew who he was. He knew who I was. He didn't like me. I'd never met him. But he lives in Jacksonville, Florida. He ran into this black guy in his complex, his apartment complex. And somehow or another they got to talking. And he reached out to me. He emailed me and said he wanted to talk to me. Would I call him? Sent me his phone number. So like I said, I knew who he was. And I called him and we talked. He had a lot of questions. I answered them to the best of my ability. And then he wanted to meet me. Well, I didn't have time at that time to go down to Florida and meet him. But we kept talking over the phone and over email. And another friend of mine, a former neo-Nazi skinhead, white supremacist guy, who sometimes comes out with me and speaks with me against these organizations, he knew him. And he kept telling this guy, keep calling Daryl, you got to meet Daryl. So the guy kept doing it. And I had a gig down in Orlando, Florida at some point, and for several days, and I had one day off. So I said, okay, I'm going to go over to Jacksonville and meet this guy. And by this time, he was ready to leave the Klan. So I went to his apartment, where he lived. He gave me all his Klan stuff and all his Nazi stuff. Gave me his Grand Dragon robe, that robe that he's wearing right there, and gave me his Klan flag and his Nazi flag and all kinds of stuff. And he had his tattoos removed.
Mainly what you came for, but my Grand Dragon robe. And this is the hood where they never put eyes in it. So I had to tuck it up inside to wear it. Right. See where I'm going. There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And this is a belt that goes with it. Yeah. Where's all that stuff going, Daryl?
It is going into my museum. It hurts more to have them taken off than to put them on, because they're laser burned off.
It'd be my pleasure to help him remove those and start a new life. It just goes to show that people can really change.
That's okay. That last picture was us having dinner. The lady in there, let me see if I can back it up and show it to you.
Mainly what you came for, but my Grand Dragon robe.
Said he would.
The hood where they never put eyes in it.
He had made a statement early on.
I had to tuck it up inside to wear it.
In the beginning of the year, that he would never break bread with a Jew.
You're welcome.
And this is a Jewish friend of mine came along with us, and we all had dinner together. And you'll see the black guy from the church, myself, and the Jewish lady all having dinner together. And now he's a member of that black church and gives testimony there and tries to get people out of the organization. He still has a ways to go, but at least now he's going in the right direction, just like the guy who shot the gun in Charlottesville. You know, things don't change overnight. You know, it's a process, but at least they're going in the right direction.
It'd be my pleasure to help him remove those and start a new life. It just goes to show that people can really change.
Okay, that's a Jewish lady. There he was, and there was a guy from the black church. Okay, this is what I do in between my music gigs. And I've cut back on playing music gigs. I would much rather be on stage playing music than going to Klan rallies, trust me. But I see the need to address these issues. You know, my parents fought, to make this world better for me. I never had to ride in the back of the bus like they did. I never had to drink from a separate water fountain like they did, or be refused service at a hotel or restaurant, or go through the back door and all that kind of stuff that they had to suffer. Have I felt racism? Absolutely, and I still do. But not as bad as they had it. So it's only fair that I try to make it better for people who come after me. But, we as Americans have really dropped the ball in this country. So there's no need for this nonsense in the 21st century. I mean, there's no need for it in any century, really. But here we are in the 21st century. And let me just say this. Don't get me wrong, I'm patriotic. I love my country. But we brag about being the greatest nation on the face of this earth. I have an issue with that. Perhaps we are the greatest nation on the face of this earth technologically. After all, we, Americans, we invented the technology to put a man on the moon. And while Neil Armstrong was up there walking around with that famous quote, "One small step for man and one giant leap for mankind," we were able to talk to him live from right here on Earth all the way to the moon via satellite radio phone. We, Americans, invented that technology. Everybody in here has email. Everybody in here has a cell phone. Hit a few numbers, hit a few words, hit send. You can talk to anybody, anywhere on the face of this earth. We invented that technology. So how is it that we can talk to people as far away as the moon or anywhere on this planet, but yet so many of us have difficulty talking to the person who lives right next door because he or she is a different color, a different ethnicity, a different religion, a different persuasion? It seems to me that before we can call ourselves the greatest, our ideology needs to catch up to our technology. And when we get them both up there, then we can truly brag about how great we are. Listen, this is the 21st century. We're in 2020. We are living in space-age times. So why are there still so many of us thinking with Stone Age minds? So y'all think about that question that I posed to you before you go to bed. Now, I'm going to do a Q&A here for a few minutes if you have any questions. But before I do that, I told Bradford that I would play some piano. I don't recall what song I was playing that night back in the 1980s when the first Klansman approached me about Jerry Lee Lewis. But I do remember the style. I might have been playing the Jerry Lee Lewis song. I don't know, but I can't think back that far. But I do remember the style, and it's the same style that I would play behind Chuck Berry for 32 years when he's playing Johnny B. Good on his guitar. I'd be playing rock and roll, boogie woogie piano. And it all comes from the blues. Give you a little example of the blues here. I'm going down to the Delta, where I can have my ago. The exact same music. You know, you say, the news is out all over town that you've been seen out running round. I guess that I should leave, but I just can't go when again. And so on. I hear that train a-comin', it's rolling round the bend. I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when. I'm stuck in Folsom Prison, and time keeps dragging on. And when I hear that lonesome whistle, I hang my head. Right? It's the same three chords. So, this is a style known as boogie woogie, which went on to become rock and roll, rockabilly, and here it is. Let's see. So, thank you. So, that's what I do for a living, not chase the Klan around. Any questions? What do my mom and dad do, or where are they? Well, they both are passed on. My dad passed away last year, and my mom passed away in 1986. And they were from Virginia, Roanoke and Salem, Virginia. I was born in Chicago because my dad was working in Chicago at the time. Yes, sir.
First of all, I want to say, Daryl, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
It's a real honor to meet you and to speak with you. I watched a couple documentaries on Netflix recently. Both by the same director, and I can't remember her name.
Dia Khan.
Thank you. That's who it is. And one is about white supremacy and one is about jihad. And both of them were similar, and that gentleman who had his tattoos.
Right, he was in that same documentary.
He's in that.
Right.
And he's looking way better here to you. My question is, the commonalities between the two groups I found were that there's like the same thing. It's marginalized people, these lone wolves, whatever you want to call them, who then get adopted by these groups that are horrible.
They're looking to belong to something.
Right.
Or brotherhood or something.
Right. So how can we help marginalize these students to connect with them, let them show them some love and let them know, I teach my kids about, obviously the bullying, things like that. But how can we, I don't know, as humanity, how can we connect with people better?
I think, personally, we need to do a lot of this stuff in middle schools. Because that's where, when kids are sponging information and learning things. And we need to address these issues, and not just, one day of human kindness, but every day. When I was in what we called it junior high, right? Now it's called middle school or something. Sex education was a taboo kind of thing. It was being introduced, and parents were going crazy. They didn't want their kids learning that in school. They weren't teaching it at home. Well, guess what? Kids are going to learn it anyway, and where are they going to learn it if they don't learn it at home or in school? Out in the street, right? So if you wanted to take it, you had to bring a note from your parents, and then it was part of the PE class or something. And today, those same schools is part of the regular curriculum. So as a result, kids are more informed about STDs and family planning and contraception and so forth and so on. They can make better decisions and better choices because they have the information. They're no longer ignorant about it. That taboo had been lifted off. I think the same taboo is being imposed on conversations about race in school. We have a lot to be ashamed of, but we have a lot to be proud of too. And like just for example, in Germany, the Holocaust is now taught in high schools. And it's been going on now for about 20 years. But up until about 20 years ago, even kids in Germany didn't even know about the Holocaust. They kept it out of the textbooks. And we knew about it because we weren't there. When I was in high school, believe it or not, when I was in high school, and this might apply to some of you all who are in my age group, I did not learn until college that we had internment camps in this country for Japanese Americans. I did not learn that in high school. It was simply not in my books. And I couldn't believe it when I heard that in college. But today it is in the textbooks for high school. We need to tell things like they are at an early age so that we prevent all this stuff and have these discussions. Everybody has skeletons in their closet, fine. Bring them out, expose them, turn the cards face up on the table, and address the issues so we can then move on and make this, a better place for all. Don't wait until college or after college or until somebody, goes and shoots up a synagogue or something like that. So, we need to do something. Let's form a committee and study the problem. The problem's already here. Let's do something now. Let's be proactive rather than reactive.
Are there organizations that you know of that are involved with education reform?
Yeah, there's the Southern Poverty Law Center. There's the ADL of B'nai B'rith. There are other ones as well. But we need to support these organizations. We need to be active. And, I'm not advocating that everybody, leave here and go to a Klan rally. No, I do it because I have experience doing it, and I would not advise anybody without any experience to go and do something like that. But there are other ways that people can contribute. They can hold meetings, bring in speakers. They can donate to organizations that promote acceptance and diversity and education and things like that. You're welcome. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Yeah, Mary, yeah.
That really opened the door, literally, and allowed that initial conversation to happen.
Right.
Klan. I mean, we looked at doing a lot of big things, but really what Mary did, her secretary, was more meaningful, more impactful in a very light and easy way. Even the way she diffused a very intense situation. And I think that's the thing that we can do every day to diffuse situations.
Right.
And have a major impact.
Absolutely. You know, there's so many pieces. Absolutely. And everybody has a, no matter how big or small the role is, it's still an important role. And all those roles need to be played. It's just like a movie. You know, the movie's no good, no matter how great the actors and actresses are. And they're in the spotlight, but the people that you don't see, the directors behind the camera and so forth and so on, are just as important and play a very big role in that. And Mary was my secretary for 12 years. She passed away, and so I have a new one now. But she was a very integral part of everything that I did. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
On a less serious note, besides yourself, who's the best piano player you've ever?
Oh my goodness. Brad had asked me a question yesterday about my piano influences. I started out kind of late in life. I was 17 when I decided to become a musician, and I didn't play up until then. So I had to learn quickly. That's why I play boogie woogie. But I went and I saw everybody. And I tried to meet everybody that I could. I didn't care what kind of music they played. I went and saw Pine Top Perkins, the great blues boogie woogie pianist. I went and saw Ray Charles. I went and saw Liberace, Elton John, Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard, Fats Domino, Johnny Johnson, Earl Father Hines, jazz pianist, Dave Brubeck, jazz pianist. I went and saw everybody that I could and tried to get something from each one of them. So I've had a lot of influences. One of my favorite pianists was from right here in Nashville. And he played, before he passed away, he played on just about everybody's. There were two Nashville pianists, studio pianists. And any record you heard was either one of those two playing piano on it. And so you would hear his piano playing long before you ever knew who he was. And he played on Elvis Presley's records, Patsy Cline's records, everybody's records. And then he decided to go out on his own and become a front person rather than just a studio person. And he had a big hit with this song. And he had his own style. It's called, well, in country music, they call it the slip key style. In classical music, it's called a grace note. You go to the note that you want. Let's say I want this note. All right? But you don't play this note. You play the note a half a step or a step below it. And then you slip off that note. Yeah, you got it. You got it. Okay, so it was called the slip key style. And like I said, in classical music, it's a grace note. In blues, it's just the blues. Like if I play this, okay, but now if I want to make it bluesy, I do this. Okay? Well, he loved the blues. He liked the bend of like B.B. King's guitar, but you can't bend the strings on the piano like you can on the guitar. So he would slip the key and like this. And it was Floyd's slip key style. I call it the Floydian slip. So, you know, Floyd Kramer, the other piano player was Hargus Pig Robbins, who played on everybody's stuff here in Nashville. But, you know, a lot of people influenced me. You know, I have my favorites, of course, but I listened to as many people as I could. Anyone else? Good guess, man. You're a piano player?
No, I'm a bass player.
All right, so you know.
I love that song.
Anyone else? I'm sorry, ma'am.
What has generally been the reaction of the Black community to your
Absolutely, sure. Yeah, and there are people who agree with me and people who vehemently disagree with what I do, you know? But, you know, conventional methods have not worked. So people say, well, you know, what you're doing is unconventional. Well, you know what? What Columbus did was unconventional too, because everybody else thought the world was flat. What Copernicus said was unconventional. You know, we earthlings and our egos, we thought we were the center of the universe and the sun revolved around us. And Copernicus said, no, the earth revolves around the sun. And Galileo said the same thing later on and got put in prison for it, called him a heretic. But because it was unconventional, but it was true. So I've shown you what works. It works for me. You know, now I'm not so naive as to think that everybody is going to, you know, give up that ideology, you know, and change. No, there will be people on all sides who will go to their grave being hateful, violent, and racist. No question about it. And they will never change. But if somebody is willing to sit down and have a conversation with you, there's an opportunity to plant a seed. And if you nurture that seed, you know, you start off here at opposite ends of the spectrum, and you find little things in common. You plant that seed and you find little things in common. And as you get closer and closer, you're finding more and more in common. By the time you get here, you have created a relationship with that person. And you keep on nurturing. First you nurture the seed, then you nurture the relationship, and you're finding more and more in common. And then you get here, and you have forged a friendship. And by the time you've gotten here, you have a lot of things in common that you didn't even realize. And the trivial things that you have in contrast, such as skin color, or whether you go to a church, a synagogue, a mosque, or a temple, begin to matter less and less. So it takes time. I'll give you a perfect example. Look here. Y'all see this fine figure I have? No, say yes. You see it, right? Why y'all laughing? Just say yes. You see it. Okay. First thing, I should have come here and given you a lecture on honesty. You all just sit there and laugh at me. All right. Now, see, believe it, you saw pictures of me where I was slim and trim. Okay? I'm trying to get back there. I am, honestly. I said that every New Year's, right? But anyway, I'm trying to get back there. I did not put this on overnight. And no matter how hard I want to try to lose it, I'm not going to lose it overnight. It takes time. But if you don't work at it, it's going to stay right here. So when you invite me back in a couple of years or so, you're going to see a new Daryl Davis. But it's the same thing with these relationships with these people. You know, I just don't go in there and sit down and have a meeting and boom, you know, I walk out the room with a Klan robe. No. You know, it takes time. You nurture the relationship. You keep working on it, just like this. Okay, thank you all very, very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. I don't think I'll ever see a juxtaposition of a Klan robe and that great music on the stage again. But it's great to have you here. Thanks for being here tonight.